Hey, welcome back. Now, in my last video, I said that I'd like to see what I could do to improve the look of this Hornby Railroad Bagnall shunter. I'm a man of my word, as my parole officer will tell you, so that's what we're going to do. Now, if you recall my last video, and if you don't, you can just watch it, it's right there by the side, then you will remember that I said I thought this was actually not a bad little industrial shunter. And I stand by that. What I am going to do is to give it a sort of fairly basic weathering. I want it to look like an engine that's not entirely neglected, it's not totally falling apart, but at the same time it's a working engine, doesn't see a lot of attention from the cleaners. Now, in real life, of course, these engines would run the full spectrum. You'd get some that would just be absolute rust buckets, and some companies actually kept their engines pretty immaculate. I'm thinking in particular of the Bass Brewery, whose steam locomotives were absolutely spotless, and in fact they actually look weirdly unrealistic when you see a photo of them at the head of a train of vans. But I'm going to go for a halfway point. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is just give the underframe a quick going over with some weathering paint. This is Frame Dirt by Rail Match, which, as the name suggests, is great for representing the dirt on frames. So you've got to be a little bit careful when applying this, because you don't want to get it on the motor or the wheels or anything related to the electrics there. In fact, you might want to sort of dismantle the whole thing, just take the body off the chassis. But this was a common place for dirt to accumulate, because really, who cares about what's under the bodywork? Okay, that's complete. And now I'm going to just use another of my favourite weathering colours, which is weathered black, just on the footplate. Now that's interesting. Do you see how the paint's pooling there? Okay. Seems like this plastic does not really like this. Oh, okay, it's going on better there. Well, let's just spread that. To be honest, though, it doesn't matter if the covering isn't totally even. I'm just going to keep sort of spreading it until it gets the idea, really. But yeah, if the covering, what? Words! If the covering is not totally even, it doesn't really matter, because this is just supposed to be just grubby. Like, this is the accumulation of dirt. I'm just going to paint downwards there, so as to get the effect of rain and water streaking there. The painting is now complete. We could just sit here and watch it dry, but I don't think other people find that as interesting as I do. So what I have done, I've done the frames there. It's sort of drying to this lovely sort of nondescript greyish brown. The black is still drying. I've also added it to the buffers there, and you may also be able to see there I've picked the coupling and the windscreen wipers out, also in weathered black. One last thing I've done is I've just picked out the catch there and the door handle in silver. You need a very fine brush for that sort of thing, and a steady hand, and to be in a place where you don't mind people hear you swearing loudly. The next step is I'm just going to give it a little going over with watercolours. Very sort of thin wash there. Just see this plastic really does not like this paint. But that's okay. Because my ultimate plan is, excuse me a moment, to take most of it off. There we go. Just kind of just gonna do that. Yeah. So the idea is that I want to sort of create kind of a patina of dirt rather than just really go to town with it, as I said earlier. I mentioned in my previous video on wagon weathering that cotton buds are a great way to just sort of create a streaky effect when you're working with watercolours, and probably acrylics as well. But you know, I don't want to step on the toes of the acrylic people. You know how they get. The watercolour is finished now, and not gonna lie, it's not quite as even as I'd hoped, but that's okay. That's what powder is for. Once again, I'm using the old eyeshadow there. Just gonna take some black and just kind of get it on there. I'm trying to go particularly dark on the roof and around the exhaust pipe. Those would be the areas most likely to get dirty and least likely to get the cleaner's attention. See, this bit here is kind of difficult. I'm trying to get the dirt in there without rubbing up the actual glass itself. Of course, the radiator would get a fair bit of grime in there, so gonna do that. I'm just trying here to get into the sort of crevices, which is a word I use far too much in these weathering videos. But nevertheless, that is the best way to describe the places where dirt gathers. The buffer beam would typically get a lot of grime from around the track there, and we'll get some around the coupling. Little bit around the buffers. I'm also adding a touch of brown here and there, just for the sake of variety really. Now I'm just adding a little touch of silver eyeshadow, just to give a tiny little bit of a sheen to the buffers, as if to suggest that they were once, long ago, shiny metal. That is one grubby diesel shunter, the perfect thing to shunt my grubby mineral wagons. Actually, it's a little grubbier than I intended it to be when I started out. I must admit I kind of got carried away. Is it too late to pretend that's what I wanted to do all along? Because, if so, oh, look over there.